This is the new market of film distribution. It's a fancy title that I came up with. And I say the new market because, as we know, the industry is constantly evolving. And I think right now, especially, there's a lot going on that impacts us as creatives, producers, and filmmakers. And there's a lot new and newsworthy. So we're going to dig all into it today. But first, hello, Proof. Welcome. Come on in, settle down. Sit back, relax. I think I am gonna hold, this is weird. Hold on. I'm gonna do that. Whoa. That's better. Really making an impact. Come on in, guys. Find a seat. No one's in the front. I feel like the front row, mostly at like a cinema, you don't want to sit in the front row because like you get like neck pains, but this is one where you could really sit in the front row. There we go. Thank you, sir. Yeah, all cozy. Oh, they're moving. There you go. Yeah, come on in. What? Yeah. Oh my God, I love your pants. Those are amazing. You asked who I am. My name is Tania Sarra. 2 first names. Wild. I'm a distribution, well, I'm no longer a distribution executive. I'm actually a few different hats now, but my background is in distribution. So I've worked in the industry. Actually, AIFF, for everyone who is familiar with that market, is next week. And that was my first market 16 years ago. The rest is sort of history, so to speak. But I started in independent sales. I'm from Toronto. So if you hear shout about route or that's why. Sorry. Yeah, so I started off in independent sales, kind of just fell into the industry, to be completely honest with you, and fell in love with it from literally day one. I worked in Toronto for about a year and a half. There's the about. For about a year and a half before moving over to London, England, where I spent a decade of my career. And I worked for indie film sales companies there as a head of sales pretty quickly. And then I started executive producing all of the companies that I worked with, original productions. And that's like when I really started getting into the nitty-gritty of numbers and their impact on a film itself, and how to use those numbers to leverage a film and use the film to leverage the numbers. After indie sales, I moved over to studio buying. I worked at MGM Studios in their acquisitions division. After about 6 months, I was promoted to director of Europe, Middle East, and Africa, and I oversaw all of their distribution across the region. I was still buying films at that point in time, but I was working a lot more with the television group. I oversaw all of the output deals, every single team that fed into them, every administrative task, every legal task. And I also worked on their output deals as well. You know, we had output deals with Annapurna and STX, and we took a certain amount of films from them every year. So basically my job at the studio was, I call it like a stockbroker for the film industry or a finance executives, analyzing every single film as it came in, from a concept to the script to the packaging, and being a part of those discussions, not only to leverage them internally, but also to leverage what our partnerships could provide. It was around the pandemic, or just before, that I was actually moving to another studio. I was after a global head of distribution job, and I gave my notice in February of 2020. And then March, we all knew what happened. So I flew back home to Toronto to kind of sit it out. That studio went on a hiring freeze because, as we all know, the film industry was going into a free fall, especially distribution at the time. And I was very happy, I'll be honest with you, at first, to have the break. It's, you know, true what they say about working at a studio. It's 24 hours around the clock. I'd be getting up at 2 a.m. for conference calls with LA. But I love my job and I love this industry. But I also enjoyed the break until the break became like too finite of a break. That job offer got reneged. And so I was stuck in Toronto, jobless. I was buying a flat in London. I put that on pause. I was literally homeless. Living on my mom's sofa. And it was at that point that I started to think about, okay, I can't like get back into distribution. Like no one's leaving their jobs. I was a senior executive. No one was going to hire me. No one was going to put that money out at a time when they were losing money. I don't know what my Apple TV is doing here, guys. We're just going to let that bounce. It's going to be like the bass in the background. Yeah, so I was forced to think about, okay, like I can't get back into distribution. What am I going to do? And literally the only thing that my mind kept responding was like, help people. I want to help people. And I couldn't quiet the noise, as we all know, lifelong mission to work with our brain and our minds. And so I leaned into it, I should say. And I thought about ways that I could help people. And I thought about distribution. And it's a large reason why I'm here today, right? Like distribution is such a mystery. It's not well taught, I would say, in film school programs. I lecture in MBA programs for film schools across the world. And I've seen the curriculum, and there's a lot more that can be given. And I wanted to be a part of giving that. And so I was like, okay, I want to help people. Distribution, there's a hole in the marketplace. I can teach that. And so I created a workshop, and my first 3 sold out. There's only 12 people in each workshop, so I definitely didn't get rich on it. But it showed me that there really was a market for this and that people really needed help. And I got a lot of pleasure out of it and a lot of enjoyment. And so I didn't tell anybody, but this industry, as big as it is also really small and gossipy. And so people started to hear that I was doing educational stuff. Film commissions, producing bodies, film festivals who I'd known started reaching out, asking me to build development programs for them, workshops, masterclasses, do talks. And so that kind of picked up. And then I was also consulting on other people's projects. Producers I knew, filmmakers I knew were like, whoa, like you're a free agent. Can we hire you? I have a pitch at NBC. Can you look at it? Can you help me structure my television series? Can you look at this, run P&Ls, manage the financial structure of the film, help me with packaging, finance, casting, distribution strategy, all the bits. And so I started doing that as well. And then the more and more that I was consulting on other people's projects, inevitably I was producing. And I never wanted to be a producer. It is the hardest job in this business. Like, let's be honest, it's tough. But I realized I really loved it. So I now have 2 companies after 5 years from the moment I launched my first workshop. One is called Hot Sauce. That's the educational side. And that's why I'm here today. And then the other one, my production company is called Sauce Studios. And so, yeah, that's a little bit about me. I'm a Cancer. I have a cat named Pete. I love all animals. And most of all, like I said, if anyone who's here, as I was just kind of like filling the space, I really, really am passionate about this business, and I do really nerd out on distribution. So I'm happy to be here to nerd out with you guys today. So this is basically what we're gonna run through. I had warned the lovely organizers of Proof that brevity is not my strong suit. I'm going to try and do this in an hour, so we have some time for Q&A at the end. Let's see how that goes. But we're going to talk through about what is distribution. We all know what distribution is, but I'm going to really break it down for you. When does it start? How to evaluate distribution? I think that's a big thing everyone is probably here for. We're going to talk about the different forms of distribution. We're going to talk about comps, which is probably a word that you guys have heard a lot, and the place where everybody gets it wrong. To be honest, every time I see someone's like pitch deck or, finance deck, it's very rare people get that right. So I'm going to impart all of that on you guys today. The new market, I'm going to talk about where we are today and why, the factors that are impacting it, how to increase the value of your project, because you can. And it doesn't mean that you have to get Brad Pitt into your film. There's a lot of clever ways. So I'm going to give you guys some tips there. And then overall, just kind of look at the content trends. I'm actively engaged in the marketplace. I'm talking to people constantly. I was just talking to A24 this morning. So I really know what they want and what they're looking for and how to go about it. And so I'm going to share some of that with you guys today. And then, like I said, hopefully we'll have some time for Q&A at the end. And then we can take it from there. But let's start with what is distribution. I'm going to take it outside of the context of the film industry, but distribution is the action of like sharing something with people, sending it out, It's how like stuff is like passed around the world. It's this supply chain of goods and services, in other words. And it's not so different in the film industry, as you probably know. Guys, I'm going to do this Apple TV thing. You're just going to see a little bit of my computer. Yeah, I'm super keen to see that. Yeah? Oh, I'm excited. I'm excited. I'm going to tell my friends at Apple, who I'm meeting next week, that it's good. Haven't seen it, but I heard it's good. Word on the street. So film distribution isn't any different, as I said. It's the action of sharing content with an audience, and it's the way in which it's seen by audiences all around the world. And as content creators, producers, filmmakers, whatever part of the industry you work in, even if you're on the creative side, like DOP, and like even when I was working on the distribution side of things, we have a responsibility to share stories with people. It's how people learn. It's how people can engage more with the topic. It's how things can change in the world. It's also how you can just inspire. It's how you can make someone entertain someone at the end of their long day. And we have a real responsibility in it. So I don't take distribution lightly, and I don't take what we do lightly, because it really does can have a positive impact on people's lives. But in this world, it's the action or process of supplying content to businesses that sell to an audience, distributors. So you guys are probably familiar with this. I'm going to speed through a lot of this, but this is pretty basic. But I want to highlight this because we're going to come back to the different rights that exist in the industry. Now, some of you might be like, video rights, those don't exist anymore. They don't, but people still take them. Because if something pops off, especially something with like lived IP, like Star Wars, for example, people buy so much. Like people will buy the Blu-ray. And also we're coming back into an age where, we have all these subscription models, but what's going to happen to all the films that I bought on Amazon if I no longer, what is going on? Seriously though, I don't know what to do here. Quit. I don't know. Quit. The rental period. Oh, I'm working on a project, and anytime I'm developing something from the ground up, I always create a watch list for me and the team to take a look through of comparable titles, and stuff that we think of that's similar. And so I watched End of Watch last night. I've seen it before. But I just wanted to get it fresh into my head because it was something that the creator kept, he's like, End of Watch, it's like End of Watch, it's like End of Watch. So I'm going to meet with them and be like, what is it about? I mean, you don't have to ask what is it about End of Watch, but like, I really want to pick their brain about it. And I want it to be fresh in my head. So if they're referencing anything, I can sort of, tie that to sort of the greater idea of things. Anyway, if Apple comes back, like there's a conspiracy going on. Yeah. But these are all the different rights. So when a distributor acquires your film, you might have heard, or television series, or vertical, or any form of media. Let's just sort of put it that way. I'm going to say film a lot, but you could just apply that across the spectrum. And then if there's anything like specific that you want to know about, that's what the Q&A is for at the end. But I'll try and be as all-encompassing as possible. But I often refer to film, but that just synonym for media. But when someone takes all rights to your film, this is everything they're taking. And it's a lot. Like, this is a lot. And this, like, every single one of these words on the screen, like this, limited EST, like, those are revenue streams for you. And so you don't just want to give them away. You want to be mindful about which one of these phrases are valuable to you. I'm going to talk you through sort of that in a bit. But we'll come back to this, so just remember this as a reference. I'm not going to walk through them all. I think we get it. But we'll just kind of keep going on. As I said, I'm coming back, so I'm not skipping over anything. You're not missing out. No FOMO. So I have a question for you guys. When does distribution on a film take place? Sir? So your script's already written, you already have the idea, and now you're thinking about distribution. Okay, close. You want to think of it in your ideation stage. Yeah. You want to think about it sooner. So we talked about distribution, supply and demand chain, all those sorts of things. This is the value chain of the film industry. Probably looks familiar. This is every stage that a film, TV series, any form of media tends to go through. All of the blue areas are where you have to constantly look at and reevaluate distribution. The yellow areas, you don't have to worry about it so much because at that point, you've already thought about it in advance. So anything outside of production, you should be thinking about distribution and reanalyzing distribution. That's how the studios do it. That's how I constantly did it. So a concept comes in. It's a one-page treatment. Distribution starts. Like people start evaluating, okay, what is this? What is this like? So on and so forth. And then you're going to go and you're going to plan out the script. You want to think about distribution every single time, like every single draft that goes through. For example, I recently, I'm out in the market at the moment with an action concept. And action films need to have action in them. And the first draft came in and there's an opening scene that was an action sequence and then really no action until the end of Act 2. That's not what the audience is showing up for, right? So in the script phase, as like a very simple example, we need to be thinking about that because that's going to impact distribution. That's going to impact how audiences respond, but also before it even gets to an audience, that's how a distributor or a financier is going to respond to it. And so you really want to think about it at every single phase of your project. That's blue. And then while you're shooting, really focus on shooting. You want to have distribution in the back of your mind, right? Like when you're watching the monitor and when you're looking at the dailies, you want to make sure that all those things about distribution that you were thinking about in the blue stages are landing on screen. Because if they're not, then when you're in post-production or when you're at the other side, like it's really going to impact you. And then at that point, really hard to go back, right? So that's that. Okay, so let's get into where we start when evaluating distribution. And this is where like a little bit of audience engagement is gonna be fun. So don't be shy, but if you are shy, as I said, I'll try and think of something on the spot. The way every executive starts evaluating distribution is through comping. I literally watch something and in the first 2 minutes, my wheel's like, it's bad, guys. Like, I can't watch anything. I'm like, don't watch stuff with me. Let's just sort of put it that way. I have to like really just kind of hold back. But 16 years of doing this, like, it's just the way my brain is trained. Oh, good song. That's your ringtone? I love that for you. Guys, great album, by the way. I mean, if anyone's listened to it, wild. Great marketing. They thought about distribution with the music, right? How are we going to get it to people? What's relevant? Yeah. So when execs are starting to evaluate a film, they're always going to comp it. They're going to immediately start thinking about what is this like? What, start thinking in their head, okay, if this is like Narnia, how is it like Narnia? How is it similar? How is it dissimilar? And the thing that that an exec is probing there is where's the risk? It's not where's the upside. Everything that I did in distribution was about looking at risk and devaluing risk. And so if it's too similar to Narnia, if it's too different, you don't want to alienate your audience. You kind of want to try and find this sweet spot. I don't know why I thought of Narnia. That's just what came to mind. I blame it on Lily Allen. But comps are the way that you do it. Now, there are 7 factors to a comp. Now, I actually just want to stop there for a second because there are different types of comps, okay? The ones I'm talking about are financial comps. But they're story comps, so this is like end of watch. Might not have the same budget, the same cast, all those sorts of things. I'm going to walk you through why. But story comps are not the same thing. You could reference a story comp, and that's really helpful because it contextualizes your project and it prevents the person in front of you. You're basically controlling their imagination, right? But through a story comp. There's tonal comps You know what I mean? So, we're doing this in the vein of I, Tanya. You know what I mean? Okay, I get that. Totally, I sort of get that. Visual comps, so on and so forth. But when I'm talking about comps here today, it's financial comps. And there's 7 factors to a financial comp. Every single one of these has to be spot on for it to be a true financial comp. You can't have 6 of the 7, 6.5, 5, or so forth. Otherwise, it's a, what's the word I'm looking for? Unreliable. I can't tell you how many times I went into my president's office with my comps and my P&L, and he's like, that's wrong, go back. He wouldn't even look at anything else. He's like, yeah, those 3 are good, but nope, that skews, the numbers will be off, go back. So like, that's how rigid execs are. And that's how rigid you need to be if you want to access them and be successful in doing so. So step 1, and this one's kind of easy in a nutshell, but the first 2 factors are genre and themes. So the genre is like pretty simple, right? Like, is it an action? Is it a horror? Is it a comedy, horror comedy, rom-com? We all know what genres are. I don't need to like run through them for you. If you don't, just Google them. The second thing that's coupled with genre, which people often get wrong, are themes. So let's take romance, for example. Not a rom-com. It could be a rom-com, whatever. But let's say a romantic drama, right? Now, if it's a period romantic drama, that's going to comp differently. Audiences respond to period anything. Not period like period. I mean like period. Differently than they do like something straightforward and in a contemporary setting. They do. Look at the numbers, it's there. There's patterns, right? Like, and we don't control them, the audience does. So don't blame execs all the time. They're just trying to make money off the audience. And audiences are fickle these days. So a period romantic drama is going to have different numbers and different types of audiences. What about like an LGBTQ plus drama? Again, different audience, right? Like not the same people who show up for a straightforward romantic drama or a period drama are going to show up for an LGBTQ plus drama, sci-fi drama, like can go on and on and on and on. So you want to think about, okay, here's my genre, simple. What are the themes in it? What if it's like a romantic drama with addiction themes? Different. So like that's the nuance behind genre that really often in pitches people get skewed by when they then financially comp their film. So I'm just going to throw it out to the audience. Does someone want to just say what their film is and what they think their genre and themes are, so we can kind of learn off of each other? Okay, did everybody hear that? So it's a television series that's in development. It's a drama, and it deals with themes of psychology, communication, and how those two combine. And how those two combine.
It puts a voice to both.
And puts a voice to both. Okay, so first question, what time period is it set in? Is it in just like the day-to-day lives? Is your main character a single mom or a single dad? Are they partnered up? Are they in college? Are they like high school? 30s?
It's set in both in family and friendships, but it also takes, we see the characters in various situations, both at, we follow their office life, but we also see, when the mom shows up at the last minute and is dealing with alcoholism.
Yes, there's.
One reacts.
So, the point in this is like the probing questions, because you see immediately when the themes get brought up, then there's all these different questions. What's the age? Where, like, what are the settings? It could be a medical drama, for example, that deals with psychology and communication and how those things sort of work together. So when you're thinking about your genre and your themes, you want to ask yourself those same probing questions and really sort of break it down, because a high school drama that deals with those themes is going to comp differently than a 30s or, let's say retirees, for example. the audience that shows up for those and the like streaming or viewing numbers, for example, and then also what the value of something is like that is going to be different based on all those probing questions. So that's just, thank you so much. So that's an example just sort of in real time how I was breaking it down. And so you can imagine when an exec is sitting in front of you and like you start with your pitch and it's missing all those things. And so you're allowing the exec's imagination to go in a bunch of different directions. Now, pitches are often conversations, right? So they might ask those probing questions to you too. But when you're in front of an exec, not only are they looking for the risk in your project, they're looking for the risk in you, right? It takes a long time to make something. And, you know, a lot of these partnerships last longer than marriages. And so they're like, do I want to enter into a risky marriage with this person? And if you aren't coming to the table already showing that you have these considerations in mind, you become riskier. But if you're showing up and like, I'm a solid business person, I've thought this through, of course, you're probably gonna have questions that maybe I didn't consider because there's things that are particular to every single broadcaster or, you know, streamer and what they're looking for. And that's okay, because you don't know what's going on internally there and they wouldn't expect you to. But you wanna ask yourself those probing questions, so you're laying it down for them and you're controlling their imagination and you're keeping them in a thought process that you want to keep them in. If you don't, they're going to be going wild. And often we're trained to look at risk. So first two factors of comp, genre and themes. The next one is budget, which is pretty simple, right? What is the budget? Because realistically, a $2 million film versus a 5, 10, 15, 50, which starts to get really risky, are different. You can do different things with them, right? The people you can hire, the talent you can bring onto the project, the amount you have for if you're like, my shoot's 25 days, and my budget is $8 million, and on the page, you're like, for $8 million, there's no effing way you can execute that in 25 days. Right? So budget is important, obviously, because we know, like, if I have an exec hat on, we know that if you're making something for 5, what you probably want out of it, you know, but also how can we capitalize on it? But you also want to be thinking in the creator's shoes, how can I capitalize on it? And why is it that amount of money? And so when you're looking at comps for your film, you never want to put something in your deck that is far away from your budget because it's going to skew your comps. It's not a reliable comp at that point. And there's so many times where people put story comps into financial comps. You know, this is like Narnia. It's like, well, that's ambitious. You know what I mean? It's like, do you have the budget for that? You're going to do that on $5 million and you're going to execute Narnia? There's no way. You're also not going to get that talent attached to it. So immediately you're risky as a potential husband or wife to me. And it doesn't make sense. So it's very, very important when you're evaluating financial comps that your budgets are aligned. So never have a comp or never use a financial comp that's far away from your budget. It's unreliable, and it's not going to tell you exactly what you need to know when you're financially comping. So does anybody want to like scream out their budget? I feel like we kind of covered budget. I don't know if I need to throw that to the audience, or do you guys want to hear like me probe an audience member about their budget? Nah. All right, we'll move on. There's some more. Oh, back row. Sorry, there's a light there. Yeah.
I have a question though. If you have do executives consider the genre when also considering the budget? Like, are they going to take like a small rom-com indie and, you know, say like, no, that budget needs to be between like 2.5 and 5, or take like a horror also around the same range versus like an action thriller that should be around like 10, 15? Are they gonna, like, are genres kind of placed within different?
1000%. And so I'm going to pick up on the fact that you said like an action thriller for 10 to 15. Very, very hard to have the consistent action that you may have in your script and execute it at 10 to 15. Very hard. So yes, all of these things, like you hit the nail on the head there. It's that all of these factors are not in isolation of one another. They all play into one another. And execs have been across, I can tell you how many scripts I would read in a week, let alone a month. And so how many pitches we took. And like we have all this data in our head and we know what an action thriller at 10 to 15 can do. Like it's maximum. Now, you might be thinking, well, no, like mine is going to be different. We're gonna hit the nail on the head. How many films actually turn out good? Like the most of them don't. They really don't, unfortunately. Of all the like, we probably see maybe 10% of what gets made every year, you know, and we're exposed to that. So you kind of can't like pull the wool over their eyes. And yeah, absolutely. The level of the budget, like you cap out, for example, unless you have Julia Roberts and George Clooney, then you can make a rom-com for a bit more because you know that an audience is going to show up and so on and so forth. And it rationalizes that budget. But absolutely, when you're thinking about your budget, it really does play into genre. They know that like for a horror movie, for example, I mean, look what Blumhouse has done. Totally flipped it on its head. You don't need $100 million to make a good horror film. You do it for, God, I have seen like, The Ritual, for example, I think was made for like $500,000 or something like that. You know what I mean? So, but then it also depends what's on the page. And at that budget level, is that executionable? So, like I go back to that, you know, $8 million for 25 days. It's like, that's a lot of money for 25 days. Like, and also what's on the page, like is, unless you hit every single day, which we know is hard too, you know, you're not going to get that done. So the budget is not just like, this is how much I'm making it for. You have to really think about what is on the page. What do we need to execute it? Based on the page, based on what's been made before, what type of talent are we going to be able to get into it? And that informs what your budget needs to be. You don't just pull a budget out of your, you know. It has to be really thought out. And so when you're sitting in front of an exec and they ask you what your budget is, that's what they're probing for. It's that minuity. Like, have you thought about why that's your budget? Why is it that number? And does that make sense? You know, do I want to get married to someone who can't, like, whose finances are out of whack and can't manage them? That's like a massive risk, right? Big red flag. But there's a hand over there.
And forgive me if you get into this, but like, this is such a tricky part when you're looking at scales or giving range, right? Like I have a project right now that would be, it may be wrongfully comped, but if you look at it like a hotel in Mumbai that was done in India at like $17 million versus if you look at it like a Aaron Brockovich and like you're looking at this true crime, you know, themes of it. But I guess my question is, in a market where you're trying to give like what is the lowest amount you could do for and what's the highest amount, but when you're coming in and thinking about distribution, like what advice do you give? Does it come off a little bit like you're not confident about the numbers, or does it give you off more experience to say, hey, I'm a proven independent filmmaker and I've been able to do this with so little. This is what like my ideal budget would be for distribution, and this is what could happen. Because you're looking at so many factors in so many different markets.
I think what you've done there is the right approach, is to explain, like, you have to know at minimum what's on the page. The minimum that you can shoot something for based on what's on the page. And you want to be smart with that, right? No one likes to like just throw, yeah, studios often do it. But for the most part, you don't want to be seen to be like throwing cash at the problem. You want to be mindful with every single penny that you have in your production budget. So definitely, but that's the first thing. You have to know. So often what I'll do at an early stage, if I'm not sure, if it's something that I have had exposure to, but I'm like, man, I don't know. Like there's children, there's like live animals or CGI animals, there's big crowd sequences. There's like, how does this like break down? You know what I mean? And then we're going through time periods. I'll go to a line producer that I know. And I'll either, pay them a small amount because I don't need like a full budget breakdown. What I need them to do is read the script and tell me based on their experience, what is the range in which this can be executed. So that's your below the line. Your above the line is cast dependent, right? Director dependent, and so forth. Writers' fees, et cetera, are pretty like set in stone and so forth. And so that's the calculation that you kind of break down. And it's how you frame that narrative to an executive. And if you can frame it thoughtfully like that, be like, what we could do what's on the page, like safely for 10 to 15. And then it depends on talent. But based on our comps, and other things that exist in the marketplace, we know that this level of cast, it tends to be interested in this project. And realistically, we could probably get like this type of a director. So the above the line can sway, but generally, like scratch math, back of the napkin, we're probably looking at X. And so although, the above the line can move, we're looking to keep it here because the rest of the comps of whatever it is that is similar to your project, like these are the ranges where they're successful. And so we want to keep it within that. It's how you explain that in the meeting too, right? So you don't have to have a finite budget right away. We know these things. There's no final budget until you're like done the film, or TV series or any form of media. But it's how you're able to talk about those things and explain them and explain your thought process behind it that make you a trustworthy partner. And then the executives are going to do their own sort of evaluations, and you kind of take it from there. But I'm glad the audience, thanks for chiming in there. All right, so that's 3 comps: genre, theme, budget. Every single one of those factors needs to be aligned when you're looking at similar properties that have already been made that you are comparing against. The next 2 are level of director and level of cast. So obviously we know from a director perspective, actually let's start with talent. We know from a cast perspective that if Brad Pitt or Julia Roberts are in something, people are gonna watch it, right? They're names that put butts in seats, and they're bankable, as we call it. Bankable just meaning like they make bank. People will come out and take their money out of their wallet and get off their sofa from Netflix and pay money to watch that. Margot Robbie, bankable. Emma Stone, bankable. Those are really pie in the sky for most of us, right? They're very selective with projects. That right director has to be attached, the right writer. Like they're very choosy for a reason because they want to protect their bankability. But oftentimes in the independent world, level of talent can kind of be all over the place. And every time I see a talent card, not every time, but as often I'll see a talent card that like wish list is Emma Stone, but here's 2 others that are more realistic. Don't put Emma Stone in your deck unless you think you can get her. Like immediately you're shooting yourself in the foot by doing that. No exec wants to see your ideal casting in a deck. Listen, everybody loves an upside. You know what I mean? If you end up getting Emma Stone, no one's going to be like, I wasn't in the deck. Not sure. You know what I mean? So when you're comping films, when you're looking at other comparable titles and you're using them as a financial comp, the level of cast has to be the same. If you are going to get no-name cast or actors that you think are going to break out, your comps need to have that type of actors in it. Hard to find, but let me tell you, comping isn't easy. Often I spend like minimum 4 hours on this as an exercise, and that's just to look for titles, let alone organize the data and put it into some form that's usable. So I'm not saying this is an easy practice, but if you're lazy, get out of this business. This is a hard-working business, and you have to do the work. So when you're looking for a financial comp, not only do genre, theme, and budget need to align, but the level of cast needs to be there too. And obviously that feeds in to your budget, and it feeds into genre because there's some actors, like Paul Dano, loves doing weird crap. You know what I mean? And so it's like, I got an action thriller and it's going to star Paul Dano, and it's like a straightforward, James Bond type thing. It's like, I don't know if Paul Dano's going to be into that, right? So you want to do the work at looking also at the credits of people, and you get a sense a little bit for kind of what they're into. Read, like, if you can, depending on what the level of cast is and who they are, read interviews about them. If they've been on podcasts, find them. You really get into their mind. It's also going to save you a ton of time in the casting process, because then you're going to be you're seeking like-minded individuals. You're seeking people who are going to really gravitate towards the material and want to be a part of it, and you're going to have a better chance at attaching them to your project. So if you're comping anything and you have a level of talent that is unachievable and you know it, it's not a reliable financial comp. The same goes for director, right? We all know that, like, if Paul Thomas Anderson is making a movie, people are going to go see it because Paul Thomas Anderson made it. The same is for Martin Scorsese or a Tarantino film, or, you know, even Ari Aster, for example. Like, you know, Ari Aster has made like 2 really difficult movies commercially, but people still went and watched them. Yeah, they didn't succeed financially necessarily, speaking specifically about Beau's Not Afraid, but people still went because it's Ari Aster. You know, there's even indie directors that I wouldn't classify Ari as a indie director anymore, but you know, that audiences are like, oh, I like that movie, so I'm going to go see this one because they made it, right? So if any of your if you don't have that director, if you don't think that level of director is achievable, it's not a reliable financial comp, and your financials are going to fall apart pretty quickly, and then you're going to misbudget it, and you know, the doom starts early. That's why, like, from concept to everything, you want to be thinking about these things. So if you're like, I want to craft this story and I want to hit this level of director, then you want to look at, okay, what is that level of director attracted to? And like, you're not going to get Martin Scorsese. You know what I mean? You're not going to get any of those people. They work on, some of them have studio deals. Some of them like working on their own material. Some like working on stuff they only write. So you want to be mindful of that as well. But these are the next 2 factors in a comp that you really need to think about when you're looking at comparable titles. Genre, I'm just gonna, hopefully by the end of this, you're like gonna go to bed tonight and like the 7 factors of a comp are just like going on in your head. But they do in mine. It's scary place to be. Genre, theme, budget, level of director, level of cast. All of those things you need to sort of look at in a comparable title. Yeah.
Does just being a first-time director, is that a good comp?
Okay, so this is a good point, and thank you for asking the question. Is just being a first-time director a good comp, or like how do you find those comps? They are. There's many first-time director movies, right? There's a lot that break out with their first film or not, but you want to know that. Like, I want to know my worst case scenario so that I can shelter the film from it. I can shelter my investors from it, and so on and so forth. Now, if you have a first-time director, it's okay to comp against a second-time director, pending the success of the first film. If that first film, they went, boo, like Hereditary did with Ari Aster, tough, right? Because like not everyone can execute like that on their first feature. We hope they can, and that's why we're in this business, because we believe in talent, but your numbers will skew in that sense. So you can include a second-time director as like within your factors. You could even go to third, but be very careful there. Because if their first 2 films flopped, someone's going to look at those data patterns and they're just not going to feel right. And their third popped off. There's probably a reason why the third popped off. You know, that gets into like trickier territory that you have to look at in different ways and explain a bit, and the numbers don't stack up. But it's hard when you have a first-time director to comp against other first-time director films, but it's the work. It's the work we do. But thank you for asking that, because that's something I wanted to mention. Yeah.
A question about the level of the cast. What if you have a diverse level of cast? Like you have one big star, but then there's like sort of mid-range actors and then some
no-name actors in there. How do you range for that in the level of the cast?
Okay, so the question was, what if you have a range of cast? Like, what if like there's one role which would attract a star vehicle or somewhat star vehicle, and then there's sort of like the mid-level, maybe like TV actors or from Netflix shows that, you know, again, didn't pop off, like Sex Lives or Sex Education or something. And then there's lower levels. Good question. Really, when you're comping, you're looking for the main characters. That's it. The secondary and tertiary roles factor in a little bit less, to be completely honest with you. So who are your leads? Is it one lead or two or whatever? Now, if you're dealing with a family, generally you're looking at the parents, right? Kids, like, not that they don't matter as much, but they don't matter as much in the numbers and they don't affect the numbers as much. And usually if you're making a project like that, you don't want to put your budget towards really expensive children. Because working with kids on set is expensive enough because of the laws around it. But you're looking at this is the level of cast here are for your lead roles. And then the others, if you want to be really, really smart, you want to understand their ability to perform, their quality of performance. And rationalize that in your meetings. Like for these roles, we're not looking at any named talent, but we have so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so on here because like, have you seen them in this? And oh my God, their performance in that. And this character really, like it's their eyes that we're really gonna be focusing on a lot, and that's gonna really like lean into their like, you know, the scene and so on and so forth. And like, I'll send you a link to the film. You should watch them in their eyes. And that's how they're going to be so perfect, right? Like that's how deep you're thinking about it for the secondary and tertiary characters. Generally though, you're not putting all those in a deck. And an exec would rarely ask. Well, we already took it to the group. So we're going to move on from that one. I'm just going to look at the time. Oh, we're good. Okay. 45 minutes. We can do this. All right. I think this is the last one, right? Yeah, I think. So the last step when you're evaluating a project financially and when you're looking for reliable comps against your project is looking at the level of distributor. Now, the reason why this is important is because Universal Pictures has a team. Man, they have a really good marketing team. And they also have a lot of money, right? They can put a lot of P&A into a project. That's different than, well, we'll see what Magnolia could do because they're doing normal with the Better Call Saul. But the lead actor of Better Call Saul, whose name is just escaping me at the moment. But it's different, or even like Vertical. You know what I mean? Like Vertical, who's an indie US distributor, like doesn't pump a ton of P&A into their films. And so you also want to look at who distributed the comps that you're looking at. Now, if you're putting studio titles into your deck and you don't have a film, like a studio is like a pie in the sky to get a film at a studio. One, they have a ton like of projects in development and they have a huge sort of slate of films. So their appetite for third-party acquisitions tends to be quite low. Now, if you have that amazing film that everybody wants, yes. But again, right, we're working at worst case scenario here, not the upside of best case scenario. And so who distributed a film is really important. Now, so you don't want to have a Warner Brothers film like, oh, this is like Sinners. Like, you know, tough. You don't have Ryan Coogler. I'm not quite sure you're going to get Michael B. Johnson. You know, like if it's like a $10 million Western, for example, you don't have that. And your writer isn't that. And it's very rare, like it's very unlikely that Warner Brothers is going to touch that. It's an unreliable comp. So...
What about comparing to like Fruitvale Station though? Can you still like use that same director like for their first feature as an example?
If every other factor of the comp lines, sure. And if that's the budget that you're looking for, if that's the theme, if that's your genre, if that's the level of talent that you feel is realistic, if the, you know, all of those things.
So it doesn't really matter if the director like goes on to like create big blockbuster, you're still able to kind of like dial in if you're looking at their first.
Yes. I'd be careful with those unless you feel you have something that strong. Like when you're comping to something that is like iconic. I don't know. I think Fruitvale Station is like a pretty iconic film in that sense. You want to be careful because immediately someone's going to be like, good luck executing that. You know, like that. That's a great film. I don't know if I'd say it's a perfect film, but it's a really good movie. And most films aren't good. So you might lose your audience in that sense. And you might want to investigate that a little further and try and find other comps. Probably fine. Again, I think for me, again, it depends on every other comp. You just want to be careful. You know, I know that Jennifer Lawrence wasn't who we know her as today. But you want to keep an exec on like the thought process and like Winter's Bone. It's like, okay, you know, how many people have said that? So just to think about that. So when you're looking for financial comps, you also want to look at who distributed the film. If you're an independent producer, it's most likely you're going to get independent distribution. If you get studio at the end of the day, fantastic. But don't bank on that. Bank it good independent distribution. Or let's be honest, you know your film's a programmer. There's nothing wrong with that. There's money in programmers. So just be realistic with what you have. And it's interesting too, because once you start to look at these comps and you look at who's distributed them, you then get a sense of where you can take your movie, right? Like level of distributor is a huge one in the factors of a financial comp. I think there should be one more. I just want to say one thing actually to add to comps. When you're looking at comps, and this speaks to Winter's Bone, you don't want to comp something too far away from 2025. And the reason for that is the reason why we're all here today. And the title of this presentation is the new market of film distribution, right? The Godfather, what media existed then is not what exists today. So Godfather could be a story comp, it could be a tonal comp, it could be visually like this is kind of what we're going for. But you're not going to get accurate numbers looking at something too far away from where we are now. Even going to before the pandemic, streaming wasn't what streaming is today. You're going to skew your numbers. You're going to skew your comps. So just be mindful of the time frame and like the year of production of the titles that you're using as financial comps, and don't go too far. I'd say like maybe three years is probably the most I would go. Audience, like even today, it's so different than it was 2 years ago. So you want to be really, really mindful of the year of production, who distributed it, you know, how themes resonated then versus now. Like we're in a much different world today than we were 10 years ago. All of those things feed into audience behaviors and habits. And the culture is constantly evolving. And so if you're looking at something from 2017, it was a different world then. So please be mindful of year of production as well in factoring a comp. I want to talk a little bit about the different forms of distribution, which you guys are probably familiar with. And the reason this is going to feed into kind of where I'm going with this next. So we have our 7 factors. Again, genre, theme, budget, level of director, level of cast, and distributor. Every single one of those has to align. Okay? Like really, 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 really has to align. I cannot stress that enough because it's going to impact your distribution. These are the different types of distribution. I'm not going to spend too much time on this slide, but this is just a primer for kind of what comes next. I think we're all familiar with the studio level distribution, independent level distribution. There's a couple names on here just in this second row, which are international distributors. So Mongrel and Elevation are Canadian distributors. Altitude is a UK distributor. Mad Men is a Australia-New Zealand distributor. SND is a French distributor. Alongside that big sort of rights, you know, all the rights that feed into a film slide, there's obviously an entire world, an entire, like, I don't know how many different territories there are. I think 193 different countries for sure. I think you break them down in blocks to about 27 to 29 territories. If you want to maximize the volume of your film, you want that film to play in as many territories as possible. So I just included some international distributors on here because often everyone just thinks about North America, and that's cool. It's the biggest market in the world, specifically the US. And yeah, that's great if you can get great distribution here. But you're leaving a ton of money on the table if like those 28 other territories, you can't get distribution in them. So you want to maximize revenue, right? And then we're all familiar with the streamers, so I won't bang on too much there. But again, we're evaluating distribution. So once we have our comps, once you understand, okay, this is financially kind of like what they're going to work out to, and this is why my budget is that level, and this is why that level of cast is important, and so on and so forth. When is distribution going to open its doors to you? This is what this slide is, and this is what it's illustrating. So there's generally 3 types of stages to distribution. There's early project stages. So this is when a film has generally a script, for the most part. It could be a treatment, it could be spec or something like that, but this is early stage of a project. It doesn't have any talent attached to it. Generally, you're still in development at this point in time. Now, distribution, when they're looking at a project at an early stage, the thing they want to know is who's the director? Do you have strong talent at the helm? We all know a filmmaker makes or breaks a film. Really, at the end of the day, they are valuable to the end product. They're the one who's directing where it's going to go. And so a distributor at an early stage will be receptive to a project if there's strong talent at the helm. Now that means a strong production company. If Jerry Bruckheimer walks into your project with a log line, you're probably going to take it seriously. You know what I mean? But if you're an independent distributor who have made a couple of or independent producer who have made a couple of short films, it's risk. Really, at the end of the day, it doesn't mean you're not good. Like, it's not a personal thing. This is just pragmatic. It's going to make a difference. It's whether they're going to even be receptive to the pitch at that point in time, answer your email, take a meeting, Zoom, etc. And director and writer is the same thing, right? If you have a really, really good writer attached to your project, that doesn't mean they've, any of their stuff has even gotten made, but, they're one of Variety's top 20, or they're in a Sundance lab, or, they're getting this sort of traction, and other people are validating their ideas and showing that there's some real, promise in their writing, and it's strong writing, they'll consider it. Their door will open. But that's really, if you don't have that, don't go to distribution. Don't be don't shoot for a husband and wife like above where you're at this sort of point in time. That's a terrible analogy, but you know what I mean? Like, they're gonna be like, it's just like, it's not enough there. And like, anytime they see your name pop up in their emails, they're not going to take you seriously. You're wasting their time. Don't waste their time. Show them that their time is precious, and you're gonna develop this project out until their door is ready to open for you, and you respect that. Package product phase. So this is usually when there's talent attached. So you have some cast. It could be one cast, it could be your entire cast, but obviously you have a writer, you have a director, you're gonna have a script. Unless it's, your mates from film school, it's very likely you're gonna be able to attach anyone to a project if you don't have a script that they can kind of lean into. And so if you have that, distribution will open their doors and be interested in a project if they have bankable cast attachments. So they're looking at, now it doesn't have to be bankable like Emma Stone by any means. It could be like a Chase Sui Wonders, for example, right? She's great. And she's having a moment right now, especially after the studio. But it's kind of that they're looking for. Now, if you have a first-time director and your intention is that, our budget just isn't enough to, get the right cast on board. And so we're going to be going with kind of no-name talent, but quality performances. A distributor's going to tell you, fantastic, wait and see, right? That's probably what you're going to hear. Because when it's packaged, that's what they're looking for. Now, if you have really strong relationships with distributors, it's okay to go to them if you have a good writer and or a good director at an early stage. Now, this director or writer might not have made anything yet, but they are getting traction. You know what I mean? There's some receptivity from the marketplace about their talent, about their promise, and so on and so forth. You can take a chance. It's good feedback. It's good sometimes to get feedback of, yeah, this is really great. We really love to know what the package is. Where are you on the casting phase? You can engage in a little bit of dialogue. That's what I was doing with A24 this morning. They love the project, but they're like, you know, the cast is, it's because what's on the page could lean like really commercial, or it can end up as a Sundance film that doesn't sell. And there's so many of those these days. Like there's so many of those these days, and it's really made distributors hesitant about projects that are too kind of like, it can go either way depending on the talent. Now, I'm not tooting my own horn, but I have a good relationship with distribution. So I can go to A24 and have these conversations and engage with them. And they're like, okay, so what are some of the names? And then I'm getting feedback from them, right? They're telling me yes to this. Then they might suggest a couple of names. And so then I know I need to go get those people if I want A24. If I don't, probably not getting A24, right? But if you don't have those relationships, don't be that name that pops up in someone's inbox that they don't want to hear from and don't trust, right? I can execute. Like I've sort of proved that to the industry. And I've been a part of a ton of projects, and I have agency relationships. So it's like listen, I could not do it. I cannot get the talent, but they at least understand that there's a chance I can. And so that's why they're willing to engage with me. But just consider that. And distribution will come on board at a packaged project stage if there's talent attachments that they believe in to make the thing commercial at the budget level and the genre and the themes and everything else that you have. So the third stage is a completed film. And I call this like baby in bag. This is when you have a finished film. This is when there's no risk. The only risk is whether if it's good or not. Right? So at that point, a distributor is really looking for creative integrity and breadth of audience, right? The creative integrity is like, did this execute well? Does it hit? Does it move? Does it, meet all the marks of the genre? If it's an animated film, does it, can it play for the parents? Can it also play for the children? And, all the things that every genre has in it that audiences lean into because of that genre. And then, as I said, audience. Excuse me. Where is the audience for this movie, right? It could be a really, really good film, but like no one's gonna watch it. Like it's just too hard, or it's just not what people want to see right now. I can tell you at the moment, actually, we're gonna get to content trends, so I'll just sort of wait on that one. But distribution will come on board for a completed film if it nails creative integrity and there's an audience in it. That they feel that they can tap into, that they want to put their money into. So really, on top of your financial comps, you want to understand where your project fits in this part of the value chain, essentially, right? These are different bits of the value chain. And that's generally when distribution is going to open their doors to you, okay? Yeah.
For the completed film, do you think that the way to prove for distributors, the audience and the potential of the creativity is, especially for independent films, is just by festival routes? Or you think, because I think we all as independent filmmakers, we make our film, we put it out there to festivals to kind of grab that motion, to kind of have.
So the question is really can festivals help elevate the potential for distribution or the promise of distribution? And they can. I have a slide coming up on how you can leverage that. Absolutely. At the end of the day, though, many films have made it into Cannes and Sundance and have never sold, right? That only goes so far these days. But it is a good strategy to elevate the value of your film. Absolutely. I have a slide on it, so I won't hang too much here with you, but I will come back around to it. But yeah, absolutely. It depends on the quality of the festival, the size of the festival, and you want to be careful as well with your festival strategy, not exposing it too much. Because then you're taking away people who would otherwise buy tickets. Like when you see those films with like 25 laurels on a film and it's like Nowheresville Film Festival, Back of the Road Film Festival, that devalues your film. Like that doesn't add any value to your film. That's a vanity exercise for the filmmaker to like go around and talk about their film and sit in a chair at the end of the day. But that doesn't pay anybody's bills. So you want to be really smart about your festival strategy and super, super strategic and never overexpose it to a market. If you get a really good festival in the States and you don't have distribution yet, you can maybe play it at one more place in the States, but they like world premieres and like American premieres and international premieres. So then you're likely not gonna, if it's a super, super good film, then like the festival strategy doesn't matter, distribution is gonna come. But you wanna be careful about overexposing to a territory. So if you like get a really good festival in the States, then you might wanna play it in Canada. Then you might wanna take it to Australia, New Zealand, the UK, expose it to different markets, show it to distributors elsewhere, hit those 29 territories, make that bank, right? That's how, because then you get reviews, and hopefully they're positive reviews. And the industry is really just sheep. You're hurting them, right? So if Variety gets a really good review, they're going to watch it. They're still going to watch it though and make their own. The wheels are going to turn in their heads. But it opens a door for you. It doesn't guarantee things. Oops, we didn't talk about this. So we talked about the different stages and when doors are going to open to you. We talked about not very briefly what the different types of distributors are. But this is generally when they buy, right? So a studio is like, now, unless you are the bankable people of the world, which we all aspire to be, it's very uncommon from the independent marketplace that a studio is going to pick up your film. Right? It's probably most common, and I'm talking about the independent marketplace, like independent producers, not us who have, deals and millions. We're not Ty Sheridan by any means. But it's more likely from an independent side of things that a studio is going to pick up package project because that's going to tell them what the commerciality is really, right? Like going back to that slide of when they buy. They do buy completed films. It's rare. But they do. If something's really, really good, Coda, for example, right? Apple bought that. Coda's fantastic. That was a completed film. But there's no way that they were going to buy that at an earlier stage, right? Even if the script was compelling and so forth. If it didn't hit, if it didn't do everything it would promise to do and that the producers and the team felt like it could, it's just too risky at that stage. But they did it. They executed with creative integrity and they made something that they knew, that audiences really responded to. So it does happen. But you got to have that creative integrity and breadth of audience. The indies, sorry, they're mostly buying completed films. The indies got rocked, super, super rocked during the pandemic. And we all know the theatrical market is so fickle these days. And what is theatrical has become, I think I have a slide on this too, a bit less, audiences are so unpredictable. And so they're just not willing to take the risk of a pre-buy and putting money into something that they're unsure of. So they're buying a lot of completed films. They watch a lot. It's very, very unlikely that an independent distributor is picking up something at an early project stage, unless you have the must-have writer director. But if you do, then a studio is probably going to take it, right? And an independent cannot compete from a money perspective with a studio. So that's why independents tend to get early stage projects less than the studios do because the studios just drop the check if you got it. And independents pre-buy a lot of projects. Let's say it's the second form. I mean, they're all coming here for AFM next week and they're looking at completed films and packaged projects. They're not looking at anything in the early stage. They'll say, wait and see, come back with talent. And then it's not dissimilar to the streamers. Again, we're independents. We're not Jerry Bruckheimer. And so it's very rare that that they're taking something at such an early stage, like just a script. They really want to know who's directing it. They like to see who's it, like a package. They do buy a lot of completed films from the independent marketplace. They do. They also do a lot of their own stuff. So like the streamers aren't buying as much as they used to. They do a lot in-house, or they're buying package projects. They will buy a completed film, but that's most likely as an independent producer when they'll come to the table for you. I think there was a hand. Yeah.
Where does sauce fall in this hierarchy?
I'm not a distributor.
Sure, okay. But you're a studio, correct?
That's what I call it. That's what I called the company. Yeah. We make stuff. It's production development. Yeah. I don't distribute. No, I don't want to get into that game. Although I also said I'd never be a salesperson, and that's how I started my career. I also said I'd never become a producer, and that's how I started my career. So like, you just effed me. I'm doomed. I'm going to become a distributor. No. But in a way, I do work every film that I work on and that I attach myself to, I do the distribution for. So I'm selling it, or I'm like finding a distribution partner at an early stage. I don't know if you want to call that distribution, but technically it is. But I don't have the means to give it to an audience. Yeah, that's a lot of overhead. That's a big team. But one day, apparently, yeah. Whoa, sorry, I went the other way. I should really get my clicker. Oh, wait a minute. I messed something up here, guys. Where are we? Okay. Yeah, I get it. I know where we are. Okay. So this all feeds into, and I've kind of like banged this point home, I think about it. When you do your comps and you see what distributors are most likely based on your financial comps, I don't know if I'm going to take this one to a group, actually. I think we're just going to skip ahead just because, yeah, we have like 18 minutes left. So I'm going to like kind of skip ahead. I was going to take it to a group and like ask you guys for one of your projects and then like evaluate it for you. But we don't have time because this has been really engaging. But I think hopefully you have a really good picture now based on, okay, I'm going to do this financial analysis, and then you're going to understand where you're at with your project, what you have, and what the right time to leverage distribution off the back of that. And then you're going to have this toolkit of your factors of comps to be able to speak to that narrative with distributors of the reasons why your film is what it is, and so on and so forth, alongside the script that is going to make you a trusted partner. Really, and it's going to make you a better business person. You're going to have more success. You're going to scale your career. Your next film is only as good, you're only as good as your last film or your next film or all these sorts of things, right? So you're just going to be able to come to the table, hopefully, after this conversation with a little more understanding and a better narrative that you can craft alongside your creative pitch. Because that's really what this is at the end of the day. I'm going to save questions to the end because we have like 18 minutes left. And I told you from the start, brevity is not my strong suit, but we're working through it. This is a comps example that just to root everything that we discussed. So in this case study of everyone's favorite, a sports drama. And I purposely chose a less straightforward genre, like a action thriller or horror or whatever, because sports dramas, not a lot of them get made and they're harder to kind of break down. So, but this is what the hypothetical project is. Okay, it's a sports drama. On the page, my line producer that I spoke to said, like, you could do this for about 10 to 15. And it's like, okay, cool. Got it. What kind of cast are we looking at in a $10 to $50 million project? Can't be no-name cast because that's way too big for that budget. So we're going to need at least 1 to 2 mid-level name talent in this project. And that's what we're kind of aspiring to. The themes, alongside the genre, it's a true story, based on a true story. It's an underdog. There's adversity that it fights. It's hopeful. It's either going to be a TV director or someone emerging, so no one too crazy. I'm not going for Johnny Lee Hancock. I'm not trying to make The Blind Side. Like, that's probably unrealistic. But I could probably get like a really good streaming director or an emerging director, or maybe a second-time director attached to this. And then from a distribution perspective, not many studios do these movies because sports is limited. Right? Depending on what the sport is, like, football is huge in the States. You go to Italy and they're like, never watched a game, right? And so what a studio is looking for is nailing every single one of those territories. They want to know there's international appeal to it, because generally they're going to take the world. They're not just going to take the US. But I can sell it territory by territory to independents, potentially, or I can go to a streamer, like Netflix loves a sports drama, And so I just wanted to give you guys this. This is an example of how you can, create a comps page, financial comps page. Now you could do it different ways. You can line them all across the top. I would probably reformat this, to be completely honest with you, because it's like a lot. I might like row them across. I don't know. You can get creative with how you do this, but this is the information that you want on a comps page, and then you have your narrative to speak to it in the meeting, right? So you want to name the title, you want to name the production company, year of production, you want to put the log line, you want to put who the main cast was, and then you want to break down the financials on it. So you want to be able to give like what the budget is, what it made worldwide, what it made locally or like in the US market, who distributed it, cumulative box office, and then there's downstream revenue numbers, right? So it's not just the theatrical. Remember all those rights I put up on the screen. Nothing goes to theaters and then doesn't go anywhere. Usually, if someone's distributing it, they're distributing it. People don't make money off of theatrical. Just so you know, if even a studio breaks even on theatrical, that's a win. So most distributors are recouping their investment on all the downstream revenue, meaning SVOD, TV, if using it as a thing anymore. It is a bit. Electronic sell-through, like when you rent something, like last night, me, end of watch, for example, right? That's money that they're getting. PVOD, so on and so forth. And so those numbers are harder to find. Box office is public. But the downstream revenues are harder. Now that said, the trades are a really good place to sometimes find some of this information, right? Now, if we know that an independent distributor in the US took the film, they didn't buy the world. So it's very likely this could have been sold to other territories. We don't know. We don't have those numbers, but it's possible. You can find that a lot with like horror films, for example. There might be some like international numbers and so forth, but then what you're finding out is that the sales company sold off other territories. So when you're speaking to an investor, this is like the minimum case scenario and only counts for one territory out of the globe. And our finance plan involves like independent distribution. And so that gives us upside in other territories, right? And an investor would love to hear that. So that's like narrative building when you're speaking against these numbers, depending on who you're talking to. You don't have to say that to a U.S. distributor because they don't care about any of the other territories. They only care about their territory. But it's a really good narrative to build into with when you're talking to investors and equity investors. But sometimes you do find other numbers. Sometimes you find that, A24 did Hereditary, and the trades report that they sold pay TV rights to HBO, or SVOD rights, right? Just so you know, the average SVOD pay window, I don't know if you guys have heard those terms before. So basically, after a film goes theatrical, it's then going to go to PVOD or EST. They're interchangeable forms. That's basically like to rent or to buy it to own, right? So after theaters, we always see it on like Amazon, buy now, and it's usually a buy now window, and then they open up a buy or rent window, and that happens before it goes to streaming or the pay one window. And that's where most of the money is, to be completely honest with you. And those pay one windows are average 18 months, with sometimes a built-in option for that streamer or pay TV provider to buy a second window. If it does, it's usually 12 months. After that, now it can still be available to rent at this point in time, unless the streamer wants like SVOD exclusively, then you have to shut that down and open it back up, or you have to work that out with your with whoever's distributing it, unless you're kind of in charge of that. And then there's free TV as well. Like free TV really does exist, less so here, but really abroad it does. In Canada it exists too. And so that free TV window then is on average 24 months. So, but then you can resell it after that. You can go back to a streamer after that. Like if it's a real hit for Netflix, they're gonna want it again. They're not gonna want somebody else to take it. You know what I mean? So there's a long life of revenue on a film, stream. And so when I was running numbers at MGM, for example, all of those windows, I was looking at a 10-year lifespan of a film and what it could potentially make based on what it is. So, and I can't give you a lot more than that. That's a sort of maybe another workshop to do at another time. And that's like getting into the nitty gritty of a bunch of TV numbers and proprietary information. But you really and that's how distributors are looking at this. It's like kind of like the stock market. Hence, I'm a stockbroker. It's like what is the lifespan of this and what is the revenue over the lifespan of the film? And generally, you're looking at 10 years, even though distributors will take the film for maybe 15, 20, 25, 30. You're not really, most films stop making money after 2 years. Most, right? So if your film can make money over 10 years, it has more value. You have to look at what films people still want to watch after 10 years. Like most people forget what they watched last week on Netflix. So much is disposable these days. So there's not a lot of product in the marketplace that has a 10-year lifespan, right? So these are just all the things that executives think about. This is everything that goes into distribution. And so if someone passes on your title, it's not personal. It's like internally, we have minimum numbers that we have to hit. And there's not a lot that they buy every year for that reason. So you wanna just know what this can be, and always worst case scenario. Always worst case scenario. If it's best case scenario, get a good lawyer and make sure they put stuff in your contract that allows you, Netflix, for example, will want the first option to, relicense and blah, 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 and all these sorts of things. There's language you could put in there in case your film does turn into be a best case scenario so that you can maximize your revenue over those 10 years, if not longer. I know there was a hand, but I'm just going to keep going. We're almost there. So resources. These are places where I find my data. It's pretty simple. I know it seems crazy, but it is. There are very expensive tools that the studios have, but they're literally $60,000 a year, and I'm not paying that. I gotta eat. But if you're looking to comp your films and you're looking for all that information for your financial comps, these are places where you can find those numbers. And then the new market. Okay, where are we on distribution now? Where are we on timing? 7 minutes, Jesus Christ. Okay, remember when I showed you those rights? So for most films, the white don't exist anymore. For most films, the yellow exists. Not everything is theatrical, right? Just not everything is theatrical. So there's a most likely chance that you're not going to be able to exploit those revenue streams. The most likely route for a lot of independent films is what's still black. Now, when we hear about the market depreciating, when we hear how tough it is for distributors, it's because they have less rights to make money from. Remember, I just broke down all the different windows and how it plays into, if you can't extract revenue from all of those windows, how can you rationalize paying top dollar for a film when there's only a couple of revenue streams likely available for it? So when distributors are looking for product, they're looking for this whole thing to be black if possible. And then the less black that's there, the less they're going to pay. And that's just the simple math of how distribution is evaluated. And so what has caused these erosion of rights and what has taken us to where we are now? The rise of streaming has put in what is theatrical into question. I touched upon that. That means less product is going theatrical. I talked about pay TV. Everyone's cable cutting like it's nobody's business, and the pay TV window is the most lucrative. And if you can't get a pay deal, which has been basically replaced with SVOD, you're losing your revenue stream. So prices are going down. The data patterns are coming back a little bit, but it's still so hard to understand what's theatrical. So if you're making a P&L and you're looking at 10-year projections, but you're so unsure if this is theatrical or not, it makes it hard to jump for the movie. And so these data patterns, they're starting to recover from the pandemic. We're starting to understand a little bit more what a genre movie can make and so on and so forth. But for most independent films, like an independent drama and all those sorts of things, none are going theatrical. And so where's the data pattern for that? Where are the data points? There's no theatrical data points for that. So that makes it really hard as a stockbroker to look at the data and create that spreadsheet that I can then go to my president for. There's an increased reliance on talent. Unless it's a horror film, most people go to movies because there's talent in it, right? So it has to be commercial, and it has to be a genre people are really going to lean into. Not just genre, but themes. Remember, genre is not a word that stands on its own. Themes play into genre. So when you hear genre, it's a loaded term, not a singular term. There's this increased need for cultural indicators. The thing people are going to dress in pink to go to the cinema for. Something that's going to eventize what we're seeing in cinema. Something that everybody just wants to be a part of. That the hot gossip that if you don't know it, you're sitting at the Thanksgiving dinner table and you're like, oh, I never heard about that. That impacts what people want to go to. We're so stuck on social media. I'm not going to talk about social media marketing, but what I mean is trends are so flippant. What is here to stay? What is here to rise above the noise? There's so much noise pollution in our world because of social media and TikTok and so on and so forth, right? What's going to rise above that that's going to make people pay attention to it? That's a cultural indicator. That's something that makes an audience get off their sofa and buy a ticket. So there's an increased need for that. And to see that in a story, in the talent, in the director, and so on and so forth. And that's just resulted in just this way too much product. There's way too much product in the marketplace. And so everyone's getting sent 1,000 things. They have their pick of the litter. You know what I mean? So they're they could choose anything. They could wait until it's completed. They're never in the 80s and the 90s. And even when I started working in film 16 years ago, man, there was such competitiveness because people would just buy a DVD. I could sell DVD rights for crazy numbers. But they can't do that anymore, right? And so there's all this product just sitting around, which creates this wait and see mentality. And it's less demand to buy now. So distributors are just waiting and seeing unless it's something they must have. Then they're not keen. So budgets budgets are constricted, costs are rising. There's less active buyers in the market, which is starting to change. We're going to see if that lasts, but this is a really good thing. People are feeling hopeful again as stuff is independent films are getting traction at the box office. So that's good. The streaming bubble has burst as we all knew it. Streamers aren't buying as much anymore. They're not greenlighting as much anymore. They realized, wait, it's way too expensive to have an in-house production team. So that affects the market. And then, of course, pricing has become heavily, I talked about that 10-year window, right? So pricing for films and the cost that someone's willing to pay for it from a license fee perspective is becoming heavily reliant on theatrical value. Because if it's not in the theaters, it's going to be really hard to break through the noise. All right. And this is the effect on sales, guys. So less people are attending markets. It's crazy. Sony Pictures Classics is not here, and they're a U.S. distributor for AFM next week. Magnolia is not here. A lot of the independent, even U.S. distributors aren't attending a U.S.-based market, right? TIFF had so little in attendance from the international market, lots from the U.S. and Canada, but little from abroad. Venice had a lot of Europeans, but less from everywhere else. Because costs are so expensive, because there's so much product and people are doing less, they're attending less markets. Pricing has gone down. So at one point, big deals were being announced between 17 to 25 million. Let's talk about 12 Years a Slave, for example, at Sundance. Now, 8 to 15 million, even 2 to 5 million, out of a film premiering at a festival is considered good. There's slimmer margins on profits because there's less rights available to exploit. Pay one, still king, like that SVOD market, but that value is heavily reliant on what it does theatrically. That means deal making is slower and a lot more conservative because risk is really high with unreliable data patterns. But at the end of the day, if you love what you do, and you gotta love what you do in this business, because there's constant hurdles. There's constant hurdles. And if you don't have the passion, you will walk out the door pretty quickly when shit hits the fan, because it's guaranteed to. Right? So, but if you love this, stick with it and believe in yourself. Just know all of this and don't forget it and bring that into every project that you do, and it will at some point pay off. Okay, we are out of time, guys. When I talked about project enhancers and ways to enhance the value of your project and talent, first of all, from a casting perspective, this is a huge one that everyone in the room can capitalize on. Consider dormant talent. This is talent who, let's say 3 to 5 years ago, had a breakout, they were a breakout in a film or a breakout on a TV show. They haven't been in a lot since. Look for them. They need work. And independent productions are where you can give them the work if they love what you're doing. So consider dormant talent. When you're building out your talent grids and your cast lists, look at that. It can help elevate your project. You can get someone that you never would have even thought of at a level that's actually going to intrigue audiences. Jamie Lee Curtis. Right? Now Jamie Lee Curtis is whatever, but at the time she wasn't, right? Dormant talent. Big name at one point, but went dormant. Executive produce up your value. If you know someone who has a certain level of cachet with the industry to help you open doors and have conversations and also talk to the agencies and attract better talent, help you get into better festivals. Everything is relationship driven in this business. Your net worth is your net work. And an executive producer who has proven experience that can help you do those things, help you probe those questions at an early stage in the script process, and who will believe in you and your project, that's another way to increase your value and have distributors take what you're doing seriously. Connect with festival programmers. We touched upon festival strategy. Connect with them. They do talk to people. They really, really do. And so if you're at a festival, often there's festival programmers there. And if you run into one, talk to them, build relationships with them. It's going to help you at some point in the lifeline of your film. Holy shit, there's more. I think this is the last slide. All right. So when you're working against the trends in the marketplace, these are just things to consider. Think global. Right? Avoid narratives that are far too local. Now that's sports drama. I really believe in it. But I also know it's not international. So I structured it in a way where financially it makes sense for the US market and it will make money here. And if it ends up being really good, international is upside. But that's tough. I wouldn't suggest a lot of people doing that. So every country has their own version of a story, of their local hero, of this, of that. And so if you're oh, but these are everywhere, that's when you might want to rethink it, because it is everywhere. Germany's going to have their own story, and local audiences are showing up for domestic product more than ever. Germans like watching German films more than they do international films now. In Japan, I was there in November. I want to watch a rom-com, you know what I mean? Chill afternoon, lazy morning. There's big American rom-coms, right? Huge ones. I couldn't even find them in Japan because they like watching local stuff. So keep that in mind. Be critical of your themes. I think I said this a lot, but really be critical of those. And then just know what these are the trending genres at the moment. This is what people are looking for. If you have one of those, drama is the worst word you could spit. So just be aware of that. And listen, you can have a drama on your slate. Timing is a lot in this business. Keep it there. Keep developing it out. But maybe try and focus on something else on your slate that's a little bit more commercial so you can build your relationships and start scaling your career. The end.